Welcome to Eating the Fantastic, and farewell to the 83rd World Science Fiction Convention held a couple of months ago in Seattle, Washington. This episode invites you to take a seat at the table for the last of 4 conversations I brought back for you from there, and as with the other 3, I think you will find it delicious. I'm Scott Edelman, a writer, an editor, a fan, always a fan, and your host, once again hoping you'll tag along as I head out for a meal with a guest involved in the creation of science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic books, the theater, or any art form where the fantastic can be found. I can think of no better way to learn about another person than when breaking bread together. It's been what people have been doing since we first started gathering around a fire, and it still makes sense all these thousands of years later. This episode's guest is Natalia Theodoridou, whose debut novel, Sour Cherry, was released earlier this year by Tin House in North America and Wildfire in the UK and the Commonwealth. He's a 5-time Nebula Awards nominee and shared an award earlier this year in the category of game writing for A Death in Hyperspace. He won a Nebula Award for short story in 2018 for The Birding, a Fairy Tale, published in Strange Horizons. He's also the winner of Moniac Moore's 2022 Emerging Writer Award. Additional fiction has appeared in Clarkesworld, Apex, Uncanny, Psychopomp, Correo, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and numerous others. He's also a Clarion West graduate, the class of 2018, and holds a PhD in Media and Cultural Studies from SOAS University of London. We headed out for brunch the final day of the con to Luna Park Cafe, which has been serving comfort food since March of 1989 in a delightful 1950s diner atmosphere. It was a warm and sunny day, so we ate on the patio and didn't really partake much of that atmosphere, save for a peek inside to see the eclectic decor, but it was a fun spot with good food, out of ways from the touristy part of town, so we avoided the Sunday brunch crunch I feared would have had us waiting in a line if we stayed near the convention center. So please pull up a chair there as Natalia and I prepare to dig into blueberry pancakes and chicken fried steak. There is so much I want to talk to you about regarding Sour Cherry. I absolutely adored Sour Cherry.
Oh, I'm so glad.
4.5 months now it's been out. But before we get to Sour Cherry, and in order to get to Sour Cherry, we got to talk about Clarion. Right. You went in 2018, and there are many things I want to talk to about the Clarion experience, but one of them is, by the time you went to Clarion, you had already published 3 or 4 dozen short stories. You achieved a high level of craft and art, and you still thought, I think I need this thing. So tell me about your decision to go that year to attend.
Yeah, it was really strange. The year I went was also the year I won the World Fantasy Award for a story that came out the year earlier.
Yeah, but you were there in August, and the World, 2 months later, you won the World Fantasy Award.
It was announced while I was there, and it was lovely. Yeah. Because Ellen Datlow was also my instructor the week that it was announced.
Orange juice?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you said Ellen Datlow was your instructor you were about to say?
Yeah, she was my instructor the week that the World Fantasy was announced, and she was on the organizing committee. So, and she hadn't realized that I was there. It was really, really interesting, and it was a very nice surprise. I was not expecting it. They don't notify people beforehand. You only find out.
Oh, they don't?
No, you only find out when everybody else finds out.
Because some awards you get the chance to say, no, I don't want to be nominated.
I didn't have that.
Not this one.
I mean, not that I would have said no, but I found out when someone tagged me on Twitter. So I don't know. I don't have a really high opinion of myself and my skills. Usually, I've been working on that, but it wasn't like I thought I'm too good for this. I don't need it. I did think I needed it, and I had applied. I think twice before, and I hadn't gotten in.
Oh,
so
really?
It was my 3rd time applying.
Was it 3 consecutive years, or was it?
There might have been a year-long gap. I'm not sure, but it was my 3rd time. But I think the thing that I wanted the most was community, and that's also what I got. I met some of my closest friends at Clarion West, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. My year, there was 18 of us, and it was like an 18-way romance. It was just amazing. We bonded really fast. We're still in touch. Just really, really lovely.
Were you an outlier that year in that I remember when I went to Clarion, I published some comic books, but no fiction, and I don't think anyone in my group had been published. I'm getting the impression as the generations of Clarion have gone on, more people are going further on in their career than in the earlier years. Like in the earlier years, people were beating their heads against the wall and not publishing anything, and that's why they went. And it seems as I'm looking at Clarion classes, there are more people such as yourself doing what you did, saying, okay, I've done something on my own, and I need to do more. Was your class like that there were other people who had already also published?
I think a couple of people had published things. I'm sure that Dora Klinjic had published her first story in Clark's World, so she had been published, and I think a couple of other people had things out. But yeah, I think I was an outlier. I had a lot of stuff out already.
So how did that change your perception of what you were being taught? You not only had the fiction, but you were also teaching critical theory in drama and musical theater and all that, so you already had a higher understanding of plot arcs and what makes a story than the average person, I think. So how did that color what you were trying to get from the teachers and from the other students?
I think the nice thing about the Clarion is that you get such a plurality of voices and a plurality of approaches. We had Daniel Abraham gave us a really clear and a bit bleak picture of what publishing is like. So we got a lot of insider information that I had no access to before.
Well, what teacher did you have? He was what week?
He was week 1.
Oh, okay. So he laid out this is how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had Ken MacLeod, Karen Lord, Yoon Ha Lee, Karen Joy Fowler, and Ellen Datlow.
Oh, Ellen closed it out.
Ellen closed it out, yeah. So we had all these different perspectives. I don't know that I have a greater understanding of narrative structure than most people. I think my approach usually does away with beats and plot structure and things like that. That's not how I approach fiction. I think I come at it from a more European tradition, maybe, that doesn't care much about structure in that way. I like experimenting with structure, but I only think about narrative arcs after I have written the story and try to see how it maps onto different narrative structures, I guess. And I use my beta readers a lot for this, but I try to figure out if what I want to do with the story is coming across and if there's a structure that would help me achieve that goal in a better way. Does that make sense?
You only plot after you've written the first draft. That's one of the things I do. I'm a complete pantser, but after I finish the first draft, I then write out the plot outline. Scene 1 did this, scene 2 did this, scene 3 did. Are they in the correct order?
Yeah.
Do I not need one of the scenes and it should go? Is there a missing scene? But I do none of that in advance. I only do that after the fact. Is that sort of what you say you do?
Yeah, that's definitely what I do with novels. With short stories, what used to happen was I would think about the story for a very long time. And I was only ready to start writing it when I had the opening line, which gave me the voice of the story, the ending, so maybe even the closing paragraph. And then I was ready to start writing it, and I only had a vague idea of what the story would be. But I usually did very little revision after finishing the story. Most of my first drafts, especially around the time I was at Clarion, were very close to my final drafts as well.
So what do you ascribe the ability to do that? Some of us are heavy revisers, and why does it come out so cleanly, do you think?
Doesn't happen anymore that much. I have learned to revise. I cannot, especially with novel work. I think it's all the pre-writing I do in my head, probably. So I wouldn't say I am a pantser. I think I do a lot of the plotting and all the pre-writing work in my head. It just takes me it could take me years to finally write the first draft.
So it's all in your head. You're not taking notes or outlines or... your wall doesn't have a chart of sticky notes that you're moving around. It's all...
I do that for games, which are very complicated.
We'll talk about those too, yeah.
But no, with short stories, I usually just... I would write down lines that come to me, maybe snippets of dialogue, but I would very rarely outline. I have a vague idea of like the shape of the story, but I think I like to find my way through the language while writing.
So who were you going in and who were you going out? How were you changed by the experience of those 6 teachers and all the fellow students? I know you said you got a community out of it, which is extremely important. But in terms of your relationship to art and craft, what did you learn? What did you unlearn? Are there any, when you went home? I know when I went home, I would actually hear the voices of the other people in my head when I was trying to do things. Not in a theoretical way. I would hear their voice. It was almost as if I was hallucinating, I guess. I would hear my teachers. I would hear as if they were critiquing what I was doing as I was doing it. I mean, what was it like going in and then coming back? How were you changed by those 6 weeks?
I think one of the most profound ways that I was changed was that I came out of that workshop very loved. And I don't know, just being loved by people for your work changes something in you. I don't know. It was really profound.
So did you not really have that back home? You come over from Greece to go there, and there's no community of fiction writers that you were able to find prior to Clarion, or is it a whole different kind of artistic culture there?
I knew a few people online. Evgenia Triantafilou was my good friend. I met her through a Greek science fiction forum. And I knew a few other writers online through Cribophile. We gave peer critiques. But I didn't have what I found at Clarion. I didn't know people in the flesh. Mm-hmm. And I think that changes things a lot. And I don't know, it allowed me to appreciate myself and my work in a different way. I don't know, it's very impactful to see the effect of your words like in real time in people, and I never had that before. I was living in the UK actually at the time, and I didn't have any kind of community on the ground, so I was very isolated. I also learned a lot of practical things, obviously. I learned Karen Joy Fowler. One thing I remember that she said was, in every scene, figure out where the light comes from. And I still, that has colored the way I approach setting and scene interactions. It just, I don't know, it changed the texture of description for me. I learned that readers are very good at telling you what is wrong with a story. They're not very good at telling you how to fix it. But I always trust readers when they tell me this is not working, even if they cannot tell me exactly what it is that's not working.
Right. And often they tell you opposing things that are wrong with the story. One person says there's too much of something and someone else says there's too little of it, and then you're torn deciding who to follow. How did you deal with that? I'm sure you heard, as I did, many contradictory opinions as to how to fix the story. How did you learn not to be torn to pieces, not to vacillate, and figure out, well, which one of them matches what you think should be done?
I think what I always try to do is listen to what is behind what they're saying. So maybe someone is saying the pace here is too fast or too slow, but actually what they're saying is they are dissatisfied with the way that scene is hitting them. So they might say one thing, but the actual problem is something between those lines. So what I try to do is be honest with myself. I usually have a sense of what is not working in a story, and by the time I finish a draft, I might have convinced myself that it is actually working. Maybe if you tilt your head a little bit and half close your eyes, it's working, but it's not. So I think the workshop taught me to be honest with myself. When deep down I have some kind of dissatisfaction with the scene, and then I get that feedback that matches that, I need to go back in and figure out what the problem is.
Now, Sour Cherry began as a short story there. Yeah. Where along the 6 weeks was it? Now, was that your submission story? Was that something you wrote while you were there? And if so, what week did you write it?
It was the final week. It was my last story. And I was trying to write a different story, which is actually what is the novel I'm writing now. And I couldn't figure out that story. So, and I had that sudden, bolt of inspiration, and Sour Cherry, which The original story is The Summer is Ended and We Are Not Saved. I wrote that in an afternoon. It was in a couple of hours. It was a very short story, 1,500 words. I don't know, it just poured out of me. It was really magical.
Was the sour cherry story a germ you had before showing up, or was it entirely born during those 6 weeks? Were you carrying it around with you, mulling it over, thinking you'd write it someday, or was it from there?
I think the germ was a retelling of Bluebeard, but there was nothing beyond that. Everything else around it was born that day, I think.
Did it have the same? I've got the chicken fried steak. Thank you. Look at that.
Pancakes?
Thank you.
So what was the story called back then? Was it still called Sour Cherry? And if I were to read it, would I recognize the novel to come? You're shaking your head. So did it have a different title? What was it called when you workshopped it?
The title was The Summer is Ended and We Are Not Saved. And you would, I think, recognize the story. It's towards the end of the novel.
And how long was the story?
It was 1,500 words.
Oh, that's
very short.
You're telling me that already. Huh?
No, it's fine. There was Cherry Girl and the Bluebeard Man and Cook, but there were no ghosts. And the novel unraveled backwards from that point. So the story is basically the end of the novel. So you might spoil the novel if you read the short story before.
And there were no ghosts at all.
There were no ghosts. No.
So when did you realize there needed to be ghosts? Well, going actually earlier than that. So it's critique week 6. Ellen Datlow therefore is the final voice that week as it goes around the room. What kind of reaction did you get, and what were the helpful comments, if you can remember that?
I'm actually wrong. It was week 5 and it was Karen Joy Fowler's week. Yeah, and I'm just confusing it with Ellen Datlow because Karen Joy Fowler thought Ellen Datlow would enjoy the story very much. So yeah, it was Karen Joy Fowler's week, and she loved the story, but she said, I want to know more about Cook, who was a secondary character in the short story. And that was what prompted me to think about how did we get to this point with these people, and who was Cook before she was Cook. When she had a name, who was she? And that was really central in what became Sour Cherry.
And how long were you sitting with the story and their comments before you said, oh, it's a novel? Meaning wanting more, to know more. It could be a 5,000 word short story. It could be a novella, but you went, whatever it was, 300 and something pages. I can't remember the exact page count. At what point in you're thinking about it, you get home from Clarion, do you write immediately? I know some people come home from Clarion and they're sort of frozen for a while because they have so much information they have to sort through, and other people just hit the ground running when they come home. They're so inspired. What were you like coming home?
I revised some of the stories and sent them out pretty soon after Clarion. And that story was actually published in The Dark, I think, first. No, was it The Dark? No, it was Black Static, and then it was reprinted in The Dark. I think I knew from Karen Joy Fowler's comments that there was more to this story. And it lends itself to something longer because there are all these dead wives, right, in the Bluebeard story. So it got me wondering, who were they? Can we hear from them? That's how the ghosts came to be. And I was especially curious about the first wife. Because, in the Bluebeard story, every wife dies because she's curious and she finds the room, she opens the door, she finds the previous wives. But what about the first one? Like, what was in the room when she disobeyed the "do not open that door" command? So that was the process that led to that. Yeah.
So I know you thank Andy Cox and Sean Wallace for jump-starting it. Was that for having bought the story?
Yes.
Originally?
Yeah, that's it.
And at that point when you sold it, were you already thinking, I think I'm going to make this be a novel? Were you saying, I want to write a novel, I'm looking around for which story is best being turned into a novel? Or did that demand to you be a novel, that it was nudging you saying, make me a novel?
It was nudging. But I think one of the things I learned at Clarion was like a lot of my critiques said that there is so much in this story. I wish it were a novel. So I heard that a bunch of times.
Oh, on all of yours, or many of your stories.
Yeah. And I'm writing fewer short stories now, and I think part of the reason why is that a lot of them were actually supposed to be novels. They were novels condensed in short story form.
So, certain things are going on in a writer's life. We've got the interior and the exterior. You've got what's visible to me and what's invisible to me. And what's visible to me is a short story writer who has suddenly published a first novel. But from your point of view, are there other novels that were written that I've never gotten a chance to read that were trunked, or is this truly the first novel that you've ever written?
Yeah, no, Sour Cherry was the first novel I've ever written.
It is, okay.
I have now written another one based on a novella that is unpublished. But yeah, no, it was truly my debut. And I learned a lot writing it, including the fact that I think a project only teaches you how to write that project, and there is very little in the way of transferable skills.
So why, after all those years of working on short stories, why now at this time it just demanded to be a novel? Because when you do a novel, I don't know how quickly you write. You're saying, I'm devoting a lot of time now, and I mean, I could write X number of short stories, but I'm not writing any short stories. I'm not going to spend the next 6 months, year, whatever. I don't know how fast you are with this. You had to make a decision. You decided you were up for it, and unless you're the kind of writer who can write short stories in between writing the novel. For many people, when they write the novel, it's like, there are no short stories for me for the next year or two kind of thing. So what was your approach to that and the decision to go ahead?
I do try to keep writing short stories. I'm not always succeeding, but I think there was a stepping stone for me between short story and novel, and that was the games, because the games are very, very long. And they got progressively longer for me. So the last one I wrote just before Sour Cherry was 350,000 words. So I had gotten used to writing longer and longer and longer, and I knew that the story needed more, and I was excited to explore. As I said before, my short stories came out almost fully formed, and revision was so hard for me because when I tried to move one thing around inside the story, the whole thing collapsed because everything was so tightly woven together. So I craved the freedom that a novel gives you to move things around, go experiment, to spend time following different narrative threads, things that you can't really do in a short story. So I felt like there was more I could be doing with narrative and with that particular story.
So I don't spoil Sour Cherry for people, and I don't want to over-describe it to spoil it for people. What is the way you tell people about the novel going in to describe it without giving things away? I don't never want to give a whole synopsis, just enough to tease people. What are you willing to have people know what the book is about before going in?
So what I always say is that it is a retelling of Bluebeard. It is about toxic masculinity, domestic violence, cycles of abuse, and I usually open with that because I want people to go in knowing that they are going to read something very dark, and it's not for everyone and it's not for all the time. Like, you have to be prepared to be confronted with some really dark themes and some really dark moments. The basic premise of the Bluebeard tale, if people are not familiar with it, is that rich guy marries a new wife. She moves into his castle. He gives her all the keys to all the room in the castle and tells her you can explore the whole place except this one particular room. But he does give her the key to that room as well. She opens the door to that room when he's away on business and finds the corpses of his previous wives. But the difference in Sour Cherry is that there is this additional supernatural element where the Bluebeard figure, who we follow since he is a child, is causing weird plagues, blights. He just brings disaster with him wherever he goes. So we follow him from his childhood all the way to his first wife and all his subsequent wives until we we arrive to the final wife, I guess.
Many of the readers will have no idea who Bluebeard was, and you've got to entertain both types of readers. Obviously, people who know about Bluebeard will have a richer experience, I guess, because they'll be playing it against a story they already know in their head. Were you aware of that differential among readers and how you had to balance in some way, give enough information so the people who didn't know anything would still get stuff? Because there's some things you could just hint at for the people who know, and you have to be a little more explicit for those who don't. How do you balance that out?
Yeah, I think you're right that people who know the Bluebeard story will have a richer experience and a richer reading, but I don't think it's necessary. And the sad thing is that...
No, it's not. I don't want anyone listening to think that I'm saying it is. But...
No. But the sad thing is that you can get into that story because we all have references of serial wife killers, domestic violence, toxic men. We all have those references, so we don't actually need the Bluebeard tale because the Bluebeard tale, it has seeped into our culture, like it's there.
Yes, it's so archetypical.
Yeah. So you don't need to have read the Perrault story to recognize what the story is talking about, and I find that tragic, to be honest.
When did you begin writing the book, and was it affected at all by COVID? Because I ended up thinking of COVID. There's a lot of rot and isolation in the book, and I didn't know if you were doing any of the composition while COVID was going on. It might have, even if it wasn't a conscious thing, it might have subconsciously helped you think about isolation and think about rot and ruin and so forth. So when was the writing going on for you? Did any of it occur? We're now a little over 5 years from the beginning of it. It's not over, but were you doing the writing in the thick of it, or what was the process?
You know what, I had never actually made that connection, but you're absolutely right. I was writing the novel in 2020, so right in the middle of the pandemic and all the first lockdowns.
Yeah, and I would think it had to have helped the same way writers sometimes play a certain kind of music to get in a certain kind of mood, to say, I'm going to write a novel about what's happening.
Oh, I listen to so much Bela Bartok.
Yes. So it did seem to me as if that, even if it's not on a conscious level, subconsciously it would aid you. So when did you begin the actual doing of it as a novel?
I think it was 2020, and my partner and I had just moved in. He had a sabbatical, he's an academic, and we had moved into my parents' house back in Greece. So he had 6 months of work, and the plan was we move back to Greece, stay there for 6 months, and then we move back. But the pandemic happened, so we were stuck in Greece for 2 years in a big house. It is a big house with my parents, my grandmother, a bunch of animals. So I can definitely see now. I had never thought about that before, but I can definitely see now where that sense of being trapped in the novel comes from, and all the weird animal figures that make appearances in the novel. And the house was falling down. It was falling apart.
You mean the real house?
The real house. Yeah, so it makes perfect sense. It's incredible that I had never made that connection, so thank you so much for that.
I did immediately.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to get through that first draft? Are you a speedy writer? A slow writer?
When I know what I'm doing, I think I can go pretty fast, but I don't always know what I'm doing. I think I finished the first draft at some time in 2021. So it took about a year, I think. I was also writing other things at the same time. And
what's a good day for you? How many words? Do you care about words, or do you care about I just need to get through this scene or that scene? What makes you feel good when the day's over and you say, yeah, I did what I wanted to get done today?
What makes me feel good is if I've written something that I'm happy with. It doesn't matter if it's a sentence or if it's 2,000 words. But when I'm trying to finish something, the first draft of something, 2,000 words is what I aim for, or maybe 1,000 I'm happy with. But yeah, I think that took about a year. The problem was that my agent at the time, I had signed her with, or she had signed me with a short story collection that we never sold, and so I hadn't pitched her the novel, and she saw it very differently than I did. So we figured out that we couldn't actually work on that novel together. And then there was a lot of revision. And I found my current agent in 2022. And during that time, I was revising the novel, and then I revised it again. That's when the contemporary framework happened. So I started in thinking about that story in 2018, started writing the novel in 2020, and finished the revisions in 2024. It took a long time.
Now, were those revisions in response to your own reaction to the first draft, or were those revisions in response to the agent's reading of an early draft?
Both. The agent helped me figure out what wasn't coming across. I think that's the most useful thing about critique. Like, I know what I'm intending to do, but the way people misread the novel helped me figure out how I'm not translating what I'm trying to do on the page. So it was both mine. It was that honesty I talked about earlier. I knew some things were not congealing, but I was just trying to ignore that feeling, and until I was forced to confront it.
Now, if I were somehow to get that first draft of the book and lay it side by side with the current draft, or do a merge document and see what changed, how different are they? What are the differences that you felt needed to be put in there?
The main difference is the contemporary framework. My current agent, Dania Kukavka, I queried her with this novel when it had no contemporary framework. And she said, well, it's a retelling of Bluebeard, but what else is it? Mm-hmm. And that for me just sparked everything that had to be in the novel and wasn't. Like, it is a story of domestic violence, and in our current world, after Me Too, that needed to be more explicit in the novel. It couldn't just be a fairy tale. So that whole additional layer of this is a story that a mother is telling to her child, and it's urgent. It urgently needs to be told so that the child doesn't follow in the footsteps of his father. That all came after that conversation with my agent. That's the main difference.
So what was your pitch like? You wrote was a spoken pitch, or you sent a couple of pages explaining what you wanted to do?
Oh, it was a standard agent trench process. So you have your query letter, synopsis of the whole novel, and a partial manuscript, and then she wanted to see the whole thing, and she liked what she saw. So.
Yeah. And the agent asked the question that you just told me, and that made you think some more, and you... Well, at that point, when you did the query, you had a completed first draft then?
Yes.
All right. So they asked you that question, and you then went back and began revising, or you had further, more detailed conversations with the agent? What happened before you began the revising process?
Well, we had the call, the agent call, before we signed, and she asked me how I would feel about having a contemporary aspect to the story, and that inspired everything else that I did in that revision. And because I always feel that thinking is dialogic, inspiration is dialogic, and I knew I wanted a partner that would make me a better writer, basically. And she works the same way, so we completely hit it off. We signed, and then we worked on the revisions together over the next several months.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you sold it the way you sold it, because in my head, I was trying to think about how it might have been sold, and there were some writers who'll just send a synopsis in a couple of chapters, and other people will present the first book, and based on me reading Sour Cherry and being completely hypnotized by it, the charms of it are not something easily captured by a synopsis, I think. That if you tell someone what it is, they don't get it. It has to be experienced as a many hundred-page, many tens of thousands of words hypnotic dream, and that is not something easily synopsized.
Yeah.
So
thank you. I'm glad you think that, actually.
So I'm glad you did. And, well, there are many things I love about the book, and some of them are very much walking a tightrope and are difficult to pull off. And so one of the ones, let's start with talking about the dangerous aspect of handing off a story from one generation to the next. Because what can happen sometimes with some novels is people are fascinated by the initial characters you begin with, and then you move on to the next generation and they're thinking, I don't like reading about these people as much. I wish there was more about the other. But you were trusting that we would care equally about each step of the chain, moving from generation to generation, person to person. Were you at all worried about that when you were doing the novel, that readers might feel, well, let's get back to the initial people?
I don't tend to worry about readers when I'm doing the drafting of a story. You are absolutely right that this is an issue with the book. I've read some reviews that said, oh, I loved reading about Agnes, and I then would change perspective and I didn't care that much anymore.
Oh, really? Well, I did not have that issue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some people might. I was equally enthralled all the way through the book.
Oh, good.
But it is something that I would think some creators might worry about.
Yeah. And other people were fascinated with Tristan. Other people didn't care
Really?
about Tristan's story at all. But I knew that what I wanted to do needed the different generations, needed that handing over of the story, because that's the core of the book. It is a story about how we tell stories and the responsibility that lies within that passing on of narrative. This is the core of the story. The premise is that toxic masculinity is a myth we tell ourselves and that we trap ourselves in, that men are trapped in and women are trapped in and non-binary people are trapped in. We're all struggling with this, and story is crucial to that. So I couldn't have done this novel without that kind of structure, that cycle. I know it will lose some readers, but not all stories are for all readers. That's impossible, I think, anyway. And what matters to me is that the story speaks to the readers it's written for. So the people who like that kind of structure, these are the people I'm writing for. I'm not writing for everyone. I know that.
I wonder if the reason you're able to pull it off is because the true follow-through is the voice of the narrator. So that remains constant, even if other people are coming in and out of the story. So
yeah, I think that was one of the wisest things my agent stressed, that we need something, because the narrative is so fragmented, we need a through line, we need something to hold the whole thing together. And it worked so well. It was almost as if it was already in that story. There's that theme of the beads on a thread. That's what the novel is, basically. The cherry girl, the narrator, is the thread, and all the different perspectives and the different characters are the beads on that thread. And
I guess having that narrator is a solution to many different issues, because I was wondering, well, when did the narrator come in? Did you ever try and write it without the narrator? And having the narrator does give a continuous feeling to the entire book.
Yeah, I did start without that narrator, but she was absolutely necessary.
When you were just talking about who you're writing the book for, there's a line that you have in the book where you say, what else were fairy tales for after all, if not for showing you the world as it is and helping you survive it? So that's pretty early on in the book. That's a line on page 8 of the novel.
Yeah.
So you're being explicit there as to what you're doing.
Yeah. I think it kind of gives people the key for how to read the story. It's almost like teaching the reader how best to engage with the story. And that was a very conscious decision. Yeah.
You chose to give some of the characters names and other characters not to have names, even in situations where I believe that the narrator would know the names. Meaning on the one level you have people who are known by the identity, such as Cook, but there's a scene when we're running through the brides, and I think the first couple might have names, and then it turns into, well, the third bride, the fourth bride, the fifth bride, even though I believe the narrator knew all the names, but is choosing not to tell us the names, and I'm wondering whether it was a particular point you were making by doing that.
Yeah, I think there are two things I'm doing with that. One is the book starts with named characters, and then progressively people lose their names in a way that I think reflects the shifting of how the Bluebeard figure relates to other people. Increasingly, he stops seeing them like people and starts regarding them as their functions and as tools, what they can do for him. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an instrumentalization of other people, dehumanizing them basically. They just become the parts they play in his story. So for me, that process reflects the deterioration of his own character when he gives in to that idea that this is who I am, this is the only way I can relate to people. I can't see them as humans, I can only see them as functions. And the other side of that is people in fairy tales don't generally have names. So there is a part of that comes from that tradition of fairy tales, and I think that's partly what makes fairy tales very easily applicable to all sorts of situations. It's easier to divorce the narrative from context and apply it to any part of the world, for example. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm. So you did your revisions based on input from the agent. Were you also sending it to your Clarion friends? Do you do that? Do you have people beta read your stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I couldn't do it without them. They are always my first readers. I mean, not all of them, obviously, but.
And how do you do? At what point did you do it? Did you send the entire novel and dump it on them, or chapter by chapter, or?
No, it's always the entire thing, and usually a manicured first draft is how I would put it. Like, I don't send my word vomit to my first readers, but it's pretty close to the beginning of a story. And it's a process that helps me understand what the story is. It helps me figure out what I'm trying to do with the story. And I often do what you described before, a reverse outline to see what I have done and how that relates to what I want to be doing.
How confident were you in the writing of it? One of the things that carried me through it was the hypnotic voice. I felt I was in a spell or incantation that went on for 300 pages and was lost in it. And then I felt you had such tremendous control. And for me, voice is very important, more so than anything else, that I feel, okay, this person knows what they're doing, and so I'm letting myself go. Do you feel that as you write it, or are you not as confident as a writer as I feel you are confident in my reading of it? Which is a convoluted way of asking it. Some people are not as confident as they come on the page, but it seemed very masterful. Just the voice, every word seemed to be the right word in the right place. So tell me about your feelings as you were creating it.
First of all, thank you. I'm not very good at receiving nice words, especially said to my face. So thank you. Voice is extremely important to me. I cannot write the story unless I have the voice down. And when I do, it just feels magic. It feels effortless. I mean, some decisions are very, very conscious and very careful. I do care about words. I think that's why it's difficult to summarize the story in a plot synopsis, because the plot is not the story. The story is what happens in the words. The words are extremely, extremely crucial to me. I like fiction that happens in its language. So yeah, voice is everything. The voice is the story. And when I find the voice, it's almost like being in a trance sometimes. It just flows, and if it doesn't flow, it means I'm missing something about the story.
What do you do to find the voice?
It's one of those things. I know it when I have it. I don't know how to get it.
Well, earlier you said something about you can begin when you have that first sentence.
Yeah, that's part of having the voice, I guess. I think the only thing I do is sit with the story for a long time before starting to write. It's a very esoteric kind of process. It's really hard to put into words. I don't know if it's confidence though. When I do have it, I don't know if I would call it confidence. It's just, I want to say that I'm a medium through which the voice happens, because that I don't believe in that. I believe that things are very somatic.
Well, for me, there are some stories I write and I can sense myself flailing and struggling to get the right words down on the page. And there are other stories when this is coming. I've got it. I'm in the zone, and the right words are coming out. Different stories. I'm a different person on them. So I don't know. I guess I was wondering whether which you were writing this book, but
well, if I'm struggling, it means that something is missing. So I'm more likely to stop and try to mull over what is missing than soldier on and try to figure out the right word. It has to flow for me to write it. Otherwise, I cannot write it.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you don't really revise, it sounded like. And when I read this novel, I mostly read short stories because I find that most novels do not have the precision of prose that I'm looking for that I get out of short stories, because it's difficult to have that precision of prose if you're writing something, 200, 300, 400 pages long. And I felt this one had that. So how do you achieve that? If earlier you said something about you don't revise, you did a revision based on plot things that someone said, hey, we need a narrator and so forth. But how about your word-by-word revision? This came out the way, on a word-by-word basis, the way it basically is, and your changes were primarily structural?
Mostly, yeah. Mostly the changes were mostly structural.
So this prose that's your prose?
That's my prose. I mean, there was some polishing, and it went through the hands of many people. My US agent, my UK agent, my 2 editors, because I have different publishers in the US and the UK, the copy editor, so everybody has pitched in. But most of that was like the core. The prose was there from the beginning. There definitely was some polishing, but the flow of it and the rhythm of it and the quality of it, the texture of it was there, because that's the story. There is no story without that. I feel.
So take me through the process of it getting from your agent to me. You've got a U.S. publisher and a U.K. publisher. So the agent says, well, I think we're ready. Let's send this thing out. What was that process like, and how easy was it to find someone? Because I think of this, a book that is so style and voice-driven is harder than something where you could just spill out that high-concept plot. Tell me about getting it. And also the U.S. versus the U.K. I find interesting, because sometimes the U.S. editor and the U.K. editor want different changes for their particular market, and then you have to figure out how I balance these things. So tell me about the process of selling the book.
So my main agent, who is US based, sent it out to editors, and then after a couple of months people were reading, we worked with a UK agent and they sent it out to UK publishers, and the first deal we made was in the UK.
Really?
So it first sold in the UK, and then on the back of that I had just done the Tin House workshop online, and through that I had my instructor read the book, loved it, blurbed it, and that's how it got the attention of the editor at Tin House, and she loved the book.
And again, you're going to a workshop at a high level of function. Were you an outlier there? Your cohort there, were they mostly beginners and you're there?
I think there were a couple of people who were agented and a couple of people who had novels, but it was a short story workshop. So yeah, again, it's about my lack of self-confidence. I always think there is more to learn. I like learning.
Well, there always is more to learn.
Yeah, yeah. And I like working closely with people, because I like figuring out how their minds work, and there is always something to find and apply based on that. I guess I'm also training to be a therapist, so that maybe that's part of that coming into the equation. And you asked about how the UK and US differed in their editing processes. So I did some edits with the UK editor, and then the US editor felt that she also wanted to contribute. And the good thing was that they both worked really well together, so we ended up with the same version of the book in both countries, apart from minor copy editing things like Americanisms and Britishisms and spellings, I guess. So it was a really rich but smooth process.
Yeah. Now, is there a difference between the actual printed state of the book in the US and the UK, because I found that whatever the designer did, whoever that designer was for the US edition, did a wonderful thing in making sure that the voice of the narrator, because you have scenes where the narrator is more evident as talking about the narrator, talking to someone as opposed to telling the story, and so you have sections where you have a blackboarded page, and then it goes back more into the story. So you sort of know, when we get to a blackboarded page, now I, or rather the character who I am supposed to be, is being spoken to. The British edition the same?
No, the British edition doesn't have the black borders. That was all Team House.
I think that was a wonderful element.
I agree. Everything. I mean, I can't recommend Team House enough. They are amazing. They do incredible work. And that was my editor's idea. And it worked so well because you have a black frame for the frame narrative. It just works. Yeah, and it helps, I think, the reader because it's so fragmented. It helps to have some handholds to get you through the story.
So what kind of things were those editors looking for? So far I've heard, add the narrator. That was the major thing. Were there things that helped bring it to fruition that made
I think
sense?
It was mostly about clarity. Clarity around who the ghost women are, clarity around the ages of the child, the age of the child, that kind of thing. So it was minor things, but really important to, again, make it a bit easier for the reader to follow. Because, as I said, I don't think about the reader much, and editors do think about the reader, so that is very helpful. Yeah.
One thing you do is the slow reveal of who's being spoken to and who's speaking. Because things that drive us forward in a book are not just plot elements, but mysteries that we hope will be revealed. So you were slowly dribbling out the information as we learned, the speaker and the listener. How did you deal with the pacing of that to make sure it came out at the proper speed so it wasn't too early and wasn't too late?
That was a very technical thing we did with my agent, actually. We took out all the passages that belong to the frame narrative, so all the contemporary bits, put them all together in one document and read them through. So it helped. It was basically like a novel within a novel. So it helped a lot to figure out when things should come, when it's too early, when it's too late. So timed reveals was how we approached that. It was pretty technical the way we did that.
Was it a difficult book to write? Whether both technically or emotionally to deal with it can get pretty dark?
Yes. And also, I don't think I would ever write a book that is not difficult on some level. I need to care about the things I'm writing, and usually the things I care about carry some kind of difficulty in them. So yes, emotionally it was very difficult. It draws a lot from personal experience and the experience of family members. And I said it's about toxic masculinity, and I started writing it right around the time when I started my transition. I'm a trans guy. So I was going on testosterone at the time, and I had all these questions of, what am I becoming? What kind of man am I turning into? So it was almost as if I was also the addressee of that book. The narrator was addressing me. This is how not to be a monster, basically. So yeah, it was very personal and very. It was difficult to write, but I enjoyed it. In a very dark sense, I enjoyed it.
Well, what kind of mood were you in? After you were done with your writing for the day, was it like, oh man, I don't want to hang around him the rest of the... I mean, because there's some things we write and where you lift it up, or was it just simply that even writing about something dark and depressing, if you're writing it well, there was still an exhilaration to writing about depressing things, clearly.
Yeah, I think
so.
That's
Did you
it.
come away from the page each day uplifted, or did you feel the gloom of the book pressing down on you?
I mean, I'm generally a very gloomy person, but no, I think it's what you're saying. There was an exhilaration about it because I enjoy writing. I think art gives me joy, especially if I feel like I've done something well or I've done what I intended to do. That's everything. That makes it all worth it. Even if the book hadn't sold, even if it hadn't come out, the work really is the reward for me. That's why I'm doing it, because I like it. Everything else is bonus. Yeah, so...
Could you have written this book back when you were starting out, or did you have to hatch into something new or learn more things?
Oh yeah, absolutely couldn't have done that. Especially my problem when I started out writing was if I intended to write a novelette, it came out a short story. If I intended to write a short story, it came out a flash fiction. I really couldn't write long. I was just rushing through the story to the end, and I think that's why a lot of my short stories could be novels, because I didn't give them enough time, or I didn't give myself enough time to wallow into the story world. Everything was way too condensed.
One of the things you did slowly and delicately and carefully was there's an amazing death scene about halfway through the book that I don't want to spoil anything about, but
I know what you're talking about.
But how do you craft that? Again, was it not? It sounds like you don't revise heavily. So is it just something that comes out of you in a spell, as opposed to saying, well, it's too fast, I should do it more slowly, or it's too slow, I should pick it up, or it needs more of this or that? You're basically doing improvisation as you move ahead?
Yeah, I think that sounds right, actually. Most of my revision is adding things, usually. My first drafts are always shorter than my final draft. So I think I did add a sentence here and there, but that scene in particular is very close to what it was in the first draft. And I think what was important for me in that one was getting the staging right. It felt very theatrical in a way. So I needed the light to be right. That's where Karen Joy Fowler's lesson came into it. Like, where does the light come from? How, there's the moon. Well, when does it peek through the clouds? How does it fall on the skin? It was that kind of process, just feeling my way through the scene. It feels very tactile in a way. I'm doing all these things with my hands while I'm speaking, and that's what prose feels like to me, and what writing feels like to me. It's a very somatic, tactile process. Am I making sense? I don't know if
you were making sense.
Okay, great.
Well, let's get away from the details of the sentences, because I know it really does sound as if so much of what you're doing is an intuitive thing rather than a conscious thing. But there are many questions asked by the book, one of them being, is evil chosen or is evil thrust upon us? Is it something we can choose whether to accept or receive? And what do you see as the final story on that, whether we can avoid it or not avoid it? Some things seem unavoidable, when you get into children and things like that, who in some cases are painted quite odd and evil, and you say, well, maybe they don't have a choice, but the adults do, or maybe the kid, once an adult, should have a choice. So what is the philosophical underpinning or message we're trying to get? Is what you believe about that?
That's the question, right? And I don't have an answer. The novel is my answer. Mm-hmm. I think that novels are very long answers to complicated questions. If I could give a shorter answer than a novel,
I know that's always difficult in talking about. It's like, look, if I can answer the question, I wouldn't have written the book.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I do think that part of what's important for me with what the book is doing is being able as readers to sit with ambiguity and uncertainty. I think is a very good thing to do. It's what promotes resilience. I think a lot of our problems come from this anxiety to control, to have clear answers, and that's a question of control. So I think part of what the book is doing around questions of violence, and especially domestic violence, is there are no clear answers. If it were that simple, nobody would be caught in a domestic violence situation. And the complexity of that includes things like love. So it's not just a question of evil. People get into this relationship, and the relationships become possible because everything starts with love. So we cannot talk about that violence without also talking about love. And that's a very difficult position to inhabit. It's uncomfortable, and we need to be able to deal with that complexity. At the same time, I think one of the positions of the book is that everyone around that relationship carries a lot of the responsibility as well. So what Agnes does, for example, she is the first one who raises that child, and she can see that there is something wrong going on. And part of it is the trauma that the child has endured while they are a child. And she thinks that all I can do is love. And that eventually, because she sees all the violence, she sees everything that goes wrong, but she still insists on loving. And that is important. But part of loving, I think, is holding people accountable. That's kindness. That's tough compassion is a kind thing to do. Is it really loving to let someone keep harming everyone around them? I don't think so. I think you can love someone and attach the responsibility to them that belongs to them.
Well, that's where you get into complicity and not just evil.
Yeah, exactly.
So complicity is a big part of the book.
Yeah. And I think I have a difficulty with talking about evil as a general thing. I think everything, that makes it for me harder to engage with. We have to translate evil into practices and relationships and social contexts. You cannot fight an undetermined evil unless you engage in something mythological or cosmological, and that's a problem of the stories we tell around evil, I think. If evil is this nebulous thing, the only way to deal with that is with a messiah or a hero. If you translate evil into complex social relationships, into stories, into social structures, economic structures, then you can actually do something about it. That's the only way to fight evil, is if you make it real.
And also, evil is something we infer. There's a grand description. We only really know what people do. We don't really know what's going on inside. We say, well, here are these behaviors, the things you have done. We only know what you're acting. We don't know what you're thinking. And evil is sort of what's inside. So we use the word, you did something evil because it's bad and it hurts people. But what is the person? So.
Yeah. And you have to do that in order. You have to know what motivates someone. I don't think anybody thinks they're evil. I think everybody. There is this quote that I like, and I can never remember where it's from. That says, "In a well-written play, everyone is in the right. There are no villains. Nobody thinks they're the villain. Everybody has some kind of coherent process for arriving at their actions."
Even in a play, the person carrying a spear in the back who has one line, they're their own hero. Well, that's what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead are about.
I love that.
They're the heroes. They were the minor characters, and they've got a whole life outside of what the purported main character has to do.
Yeah. So I think that's a necessary part of the process of understanding how and why people act the way they do. And that's, for me, the core, the starting point of a solution. That's, again, the therapist in me, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of evil, there was one line that, I don't know that I want to say took me out of the book, but the same way there's a line that everyone's been quoting from The Great Gatsby about these uncaring people will go around and break things. I can't remember the exact line as well. There's two characters, rich characters, who go around and break things and then go back to their own lives and leave other people to clean up their messes. I should have been able to quote that off the top of my head. I've shared it so many times about some people in the political sphere. But you've got that line in there, I forget how far in, which it says, "The rich are the blight of this land. They take and take until our backs are broken and the soil is dead. It's in their nature. They can't help themselves." Because of the current political situation, that particular sentence made me out of the story. Not your fault. It's a fault of the times. But I said, yes, that's referring to some things that are going on right now in the world.
Yeah.
Which I don't know whether consciously or subconsciously that was going on as you were writing the book. But not that this is necessarily a book about capitalism, but something's in there about economics and capitalism and class and all that.
It kind of is, because that's what allows. Like it's there in metaphor. Bluebeard belongs to a class that is basically a cancer. It takes and takes, and when the host that feeds it dies, it moves on to something else. It's a virus, not a cancer. And I think that was very consciously put in there because I wanted to hear from the wider community that surrounds these people. I wanted to give a sense of the context that in which they live.
When was the book locked down, and how long did you have to wait from that point for me to be able to read the book? So it's been out. Here we are. We're chatting at Worldcon. It's August, and came out about 4.5 months ago. When were you all done, and when did the waiting process begin for you?
I think I was done with the US copy edits and final proofs in maybe October of last year, I want to say, and a bit later with the UK ones because the processes are different. So I was done with the actual revisions a year ago, I suppose, from now. But it didn't take that long. It was, the timeline was pretty speedy, actually.
And how patient are you? I mean, you were all done. It's like, please come out tomorrow. Why do I have to wait until next year?
Oh, I'm very patient, I think. Yeah. Because,
really?
Yeah, because I focus on what I can control, and that's what I write and what I do. So I'm just working on the next thing, and what happens beyond that is sometimes not even my concern. Like the book is out of my hands now, and what happens.
But the part that you're hoping to have happen is for people to read it and love it. So.
Yeah. It means a lot that the book is finding some of its readers. But again, I have very little control of that. That's mainly my publisher's effort. And what little I can do, I do. But beyond that, I know I cannot control it. So there is no point being impatient about it.
Yes, unless, as you said earlier, when you're writing, you're not paying attention to the reader. But when the book comes out, are you paying attention to the reader? Are you one of those people who is looking at reviews, or are you the kind of person who says to your friends, if there's a good one, let me know about the good ones, but hide the bad ones?
Yeah, my publicist sent me some reviews, and that was a very nice thing to know. But I don't seek out reviews, and I try not to go into reader spaces. Reader reviews are for other readers; they're not.
Well,
for
I don't
me.
mean Goodreads. I just mean if the New York Times or someone.
Oh yeah, I read those. Yeah. The New York Times, they love the book, and I think that helped a lot. It helped a lot to find its readers. But yeah, mostly I'm trying to do my thing, and everything else is bonus.
You hinted at one point what your next book was going to be, which it makes it sound from our earlier part of the conversation as if that was meant to be your previous book. But what you said was, and you had parenthetical asides and question marks in your description of what the next book would be. You said your next, probably, novel, most likely about a group of queers in post-Civil War Greece and the ghosts that haunt the nation. Was that the first book that you worked on? Because earlier you mentioned something about there was a first book that you're now working on. Is that the one we're talking about?
So that was, it was a first book, but not a first novel. So it was part of a short story collection that I put together with my first agent. So there was 4 or 5 short stories and then a novella. And that novella is what is now becoming my second novel, because that was also not enough space for that story to exist. And it's become much more complicated. And the reason I'm so apprehensive about it is that it is so complex. It has structurally is really hard to keep track of, even for me. I do need the Post-it notes, the multiple monitors.
Oh, for this particular
the murder
one.
board. Yeah, I do.
So this one's less a gut novel than Sour Cherry was?
The guts of it are there, have been there from the beginning, but it does a lot of meta narrative things, because it is about how we choose to frame history and retell history and how memory feeds into that. It's about the idea that history itself is a genre. So it's a book about narrative, I suppose, and that there's a lot of intellectual work that goes into it, and in order to keep track of that, I need to have a very clear overview of the shape of the novel and what it's doing. And again, it was a question of finding that through line that keeps everything together.
And is this a book that you pitched to the agent, who pitched it to editors, and is it something under contract, or is it being written speculatively that we'll see what happens when I'm done?
It's not under contract. My contracts have an option clause, but no, I didn't even pitch it to my agent. Maybe I should have.
Oh, the agent doesn't know about it? Just
She
you and
knows
me
now.
right now?
We had a meeting the other day where we're talking about the edits. The next one I'm gonna pitch to her first, but this one I knew I needed to get it done before writing anything else, because it just kept pestering me, especially given the political situation and the political context and the world we're living in with the rise of fascism and genocide and all of that. It is a book about that. So,
and this one is set in Greece?
It is. It is set in Greece. Some of it is in the 60s, between the civil war and the dictatorship we had in Greece, and some of it is more recent. And some of it happens during the dictatorship, actually.
Do you have a Greek readership? Are you known there, or is it have you been in translation in Greece, or is it published in English in Greece? Or
it's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I know some people know me from that science fiction fantasy forum that I was part of, and they have people in Greece have translated a couple of my short stories, but the novel hasn't been translated, so I don't actually know. I don't know.
Do you have any concerns, based on the topic of this book, that it will be paid attention to more in Greece, because you'll be taking some kind of position on the dictatorship, so I imagine it might be more read than some of the other works.
Yeah, I do have slight concerns about that, but I believe what I believe, and some people won't like it, but that's fine. That's how things are. You need to you need to have a position. You can't please everyone.
So what about the short story collection that began this all, that was supposed to occur before either of the two novels? Is that something still happening? And how many will be in there? Because you're just saying something about 3 short stories and a novella, which is not quite a short story, because you published many short stories. So is something like that still in the works with someone?
Maybe someday. I don't know which stories will be in it. There is plenty of short stories. I have put together 3 or 4 short story collections at this point, and none of them are exactly what I want them to be, or my agent wants them to be. So,
is it you can't find the right theme for the collection, or the arc isn't right for the collection?
Yeah, that might be it. I want collections that do something as a whole. I tend to gravitate towards collections that are not just best-ofs. They do something together. Like the whole is larger than the sum of its parts, and I haven't cracked that yet.
So how many do you have now, short stories, that you're trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle for a good collection?
Oh, I think it's over 100 short stories at this point, and it's all over the genre map. So that is another difficulty, I guess. I tend to write I don't think about genre when I write, so I can end up anywhere from hard science fiction to science fantasy to mythological retellings to anything at all. So it's hard. Do you organize a collection of all specific genre stories, or thematically? I don't know.
There was one writer I was talking to recently whose publisher said, just send us all your stories. Don't even try and put them in order. We'll try and see what makes sense to us. And then it began the winnowing down, because the author had no idea.
Oh, I wish somebody would say that to me. That sounds blissful. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, so how's the novel coming? What stage are you at on the new one?
I am going to have what I hope will be the draft that my publisher will see in a couple of months, hopefully. We'll see if I can pull that off. Yeah.
You've also been receiving quite a bit of acclaim for your gaming. We've talked about that before. Restore, Reflect, Retry. Are you going to be doing more of that? Are you finding time for doing more of that?
Maybe at some point I would like to do more of that, but currently, because I'm training as a therapist and I'm finishing this novel and I'm writing a couple of short stories, there is just no time to do another game, and it takes up a lot of time and a lot of brain space. So not for the foreseeable future, but maybe farther on.
Right. But you found that helps you be a writer of prose fiction to do a game.
Yes, definitely.
So would you recommend that if writers wanted to get better at prose fiction, they should somehow get involved in games in some way? as a learning exercise? Well, they really have to love doing it. But
yeah, that's a really good question. It has definitely taught me things about plot. I think it's a useful exercise. Most of my games are for choice of games. They are choice-based games. So it helps to, at every point in the story, to think of all the different ways the story could go, and then choose your own way through the narrative. I think that's a helpful thing for a prose writer, a non-interactive prose writer to consider. So it could be helpful in that way, for sure.
Well, that kind of, because that's almost like a writing exercise. I've heard writing teachers, even at Clarion, come up with in order to write a story. They will say, okay, you've written the story, now give me 10 other different endings for that story.
Yeah,
don't go for the first obvious thing.
Yeah.
And if what you do is you're writing something that's continually branching, you're never going for the first obvious thing because you're having to pick 4 or 5 others for them to choose from.
Yeah. And it's not just branching. It's the other thing I've learned through interactive fiction is basically how character arc works. So in interactive novels, you will have a player character who is the main character in the story, and they will have the opportunity to create their personality, basically. So based on their personality stats, you will give them different choices at different points in the game. And for me, when people make choices that are out of character, that's what bends the character arc. So it's the main question for character for me in a story is how do they change or how do they fail to change? And when they fail to change, that's tragedy. That's what Bluebeard does in the book. He fails to change. So yes, I guess go do some games. It will help. Yeah, you're absolutely right, actually. Yeah.
So here we are at the end of Worldcon. Today is Sunday. And it's dwindling down. There's just a few more hours to go. I know on Wednesday you were on a panel called No More Tropes for Me, Let's Write Weird. What wisdom would I have heard had I been there? I had my own things running around doing. And for the people who couldn't be there, what did you share about that?
I guess the main thing is to just lean into your weird. For me, stories make the world larger. So if we only stick to a given narrative structure, if we only follow the same narrative, if we all follow the same narrative beats and structure our stories in the same ways, that narrows down the realm of possibility. It makes the world smaller. It makes us smaller. We need to be able to respond to the world in a whole set of different ways. If we learn things from stories and all stories are structured in the same way, then nothing will ever change. So it was a very hopeful panel in the sense that there is space out there for really weird stuff. You can have a story with no punctuation, and there will be an audience for that. So that for me is a comfort. Like not everybody wants the same story over and over and over again. Sometimes I see people looking to read specific tropes, and that can be comforting sometimes, but I think venturing outside of that and expanding your horizons and embracing weird structures, it just makes us more resilient and more able to engage with the world as it is.
What did it seem that the audience wanted? Once you got to the Q&A section, what was the audience looking for you to talk about?
There were some craft questions, so there were some writers who were trying to figure out how to grapple with structure while also remaining faithful to what they wanted their stories to do. So I think they were looking for permission to venture outside of given narrative structures. So if we managed to do that for them, I'm happy.
And how was your table talk? What kind of audience did you have show up for that? Were they people who read the novel and had their own questions, or fans of your other things, or gaming fans, or who showed up for that?
So there were people who were there for the short fiction, the novel, the games, and some writer friends that I know. I really enjoy that type of discussion. It was a really I don't enjoy panels as much as I do table talks because I like things to be less hierarchical, and I value one-to-one or small group connection. It feels deeper and more meaningful. Like I don't feel like I have the authority to speak on any subject as an expert, but I do think I can engage in conversation, and that's what I find valuable. So it was really, really good.
Good. And how long have you been coming to these things? Because you went to Clarion in 18?
Yes.
Right? When did you start coming to conventions? Because somehow you and I have never met, as far as I know. We may have been in the same room or the same conventions and never spoken, because you have hundreds of people and it's hard to meet everyone. But conventions been a part of your life, or you don't get over here that often?
I haven't been a big con goer. I think my first Worldcon was Helsinki, so that was 2016 or 17 maybe.
In Helsinki?
Yeah.
Well, then we would have been in the same building, but
right.
As I recall, that was the single, I don't know why I say most crowded, but the single most cramped space.
Yeah.
There were things I couldn't get into. It's the only convention I couldn't get into the opening ceremonies because it was...
Yeah.
So many people were so hungry to be there because it was in that location that I think we were told, or we announced, or the convention announced, don't come. I mean, there's a point when they said, we're only selling 50 daily memberships, which normally you could walk in and buy a membership, and they said we will only sell 100 a day or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that.
That because they had no space and that fire marshals shutting things down. It's very popular. Yes. Anytime you move to an area where it hasn't been for a while, people from all the surrounding countries just go and rush.
I wasn't on any programming in that one. I just went as a fan, I guess. And it was good because I met people I knew online for the first time, so that was the appeal for me. Then I've been to the Dublin one, and this is only my third Worldcon. And I've been to the Nebulous ones and World Fantasy ones.
Which Nebulas? Maybe it was one I wasn't at.
2019 was when I was up for my first Nebula.
Was that in Anaheim? Or?
Yes, it was.
I guess we were there.
So we have crossed paths.
Without actually... I know, it's impossible to meet everyone.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, as you probably know, if you're in a party, to get from one side of the room to the other, you pass 30 people you know, and you speak a couple of minutes with each one.
And then it's been 3 hours, and the party's over.
Trying to get across the room. So do you go home exhausted or exhilarated? It sounds as if from coming home from Clarion, you immediately were able to get work done. Will you, when you get home, will you crash for a week?
I wish. I usually need some time to recover. I'm not a very social person, so in my everyday life, I don't see people much. I can go weeks or months without encountering another human being in the flesh, apart from my partner, who is always there. So I'm all peopled out now, and I need time to recover. I do have clients next week, though. So
well, I'm glad we were able to sneak away for this. Well, not to bring the real world too much into it as we're ending, but there are so many of my international friends who I did not see this weekend. Rightly so. I was even telling them, don't come. I don't. But you came. Did any trouble getting in?
No, I didn't have any trouble. I was surprised by that. I did debate whether I was going to come or not, especially as a trans person. I didn't want to be disappeared at the border or accused of fraud, but it was surprisingly smooth. I have a friend, though, who was really invasively interrogated at the border, and this is terrible, unacceptable. And I do understand why a lot of international people chose not to come.
Yeah. Which I've told them to every time it was online. There was some mention. I didn't expect to see anyone. None of my UK friends are here, and from many other places. That's why next year I will be going to EasterCon. I've decided.
Oh, nice.
Because that's the only way I'll be able to see them. So the minute memberships became available, I went and bought a ticket.
Yeah. So maybe I'll see you there.
Do you do EasterCon?
I haven't, but I might next year. I don't know.
Well, maybe we'll see each other. I'm very glad we were able to steal away here as all wines. And thank you so much. I absolutely adored Sour Cherry. It's one of those books that I read and say it's a miracle that it worked because of what it is, but because it is truly a spell. It was truly a hypnotic spell that put me in a dream state while I read it.
No, thank you so much.
So
I really appreciate
truly
that.
adored the book. So thank you, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it. And let's get back to the con. Are you doing anything else this afternoon, or is it just wrapping up for us all?
Wrapping up, yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you. I look forward to. Does the next book have a title you can share yet, or you're still playing with the title?
I can share that. I mean, I don't know if it's gonna be.
Sometimes people like to hold the title till the end and not reveal it. But
the current title is Anna Dreams of a Dead Revolutionary. I don't know if that will be the final title, but
well, often books go through many working titles before the actual one is done. Yeah. I can't wait to read it, and thank you so much for bringing into the world what you bring into the world.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now let's get back to the end of Worldcon.
Yeah.
And that was my brunch with Natalia Theodoridou at the Luna Park Cafe in Seattle, Washington at the end of the 2025 Worldcon. I only have one comment about what you just heard. Please forgive me for failing to remember the exact Great Gatsby quote about careless people breaking things. It goes, "They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they had made. Considering how many Toms and Daisies there are in the world at the moment, I should never have forgotten those words." And speaking of breaking things, if after breaking bread with Natalia and me you'd like to find out more about him, check him out on Blue Sky as Nassos, Nassos, or at his site, which is Natalia-Theodoridou, and I'll spell that Natalia-Theodorou. You can find out more about the stories I've published in the magazines I've edited over at scottedelman.com, and if you'd care to tune in for my daily babbling, I'm on both Blue Sky and Mastodon as Scott Edelman. And if there's anything you want to share with me, give me a shout at scott@scottedelman.com. And all those Scott Edelmans are SCOTTEDELMAN. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll take a moment to rate or review Eating the Fantastic at Apple Podcasts and like it on Facebook, because that will help bring the podcast to the attention of a wider audience. If my meal with Natalia has you hungering to sit in for more of my conversations with creators of the fantastic, there are many ways to make sure you never miss an episode. You can head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Eating the Fantastic and subscribe. Or you can search on the terms Podlink and Eating the Fantastic in your browser, and that'll take you to a site with several dozen possible places to download the show. Or you can use the RSS feed, which you'll find at eatingthefantastic.com. That's also where you'll be able to check out a photo of Natalia, as well as the food we shared at the Luna Park Cafe. If you'd like to help keep new episodes of Eating the Fantastic showing up every other Friday, I hope you'll join the supporters who cover some of the cost of the show, the books I buy to keep up with my guests' work, the equipment, the bandwidth, the transportation of my guests to and from cons and restaurants, the cloud processing software which kills most of the ambient noise which would obscure our conversation, and of course the food which helps relax my guests and creates an intimacy you're just not going to get out of a studio recorded podcast. The easiest way to help out is to toss a couple of bucks in the tip jar at paypal.me/eatingthefantastic. Or if you feel like buying me a cup of coffee, head over to coffee.com/eatingthefantastic, where coffee is KO-FI. But if you'd like to feel even more connected with what I'm doing here, you could chip in with a small recurring monthly donation over at patreon.com/eatingthefantastic, where there are perks involved depending on your level of support. A big thank you once again to Alex Under the Sky at Audio Jungle, composer of this episode's theme music. If you're listening to this episode around the time it was uploaded rather than time shifting from the future, you still have a chance to catch me November 18th in New York, when I'll be taking part in the Brooklyn Books and Booze reading series at Barrow's Intense Tasting Room inside Industry City, along with Mary Robinette Cole, Fran Wild, and Victor Pinheiro. I'll be promoting my new science fiction collection, 101 Things to Do Before You're Downloaded, coming out next month from PS Publishing. I hope to see you there. And do not doubt but that when I'm in New York, I will also be recording a new episode of the podcast with an as yet undetermined guest. Coming up 2 weeks from now on the podcast, you'll be able to have lunch with Elia Dawn Johnson, a multi-award winning author, most recently for Trouble the Saints, which won the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. Until then, may all your meals and those conversations which go with them be fantastic.